It was meant to be the ultimate prank video, but when the American vlogger aimed his disguised water gun at the Swiss guard's face, the silence that followed revealed everything. Want to know what really happened? Hit that subscribe button and let's get into it. The morning sun painted golden streaks across St. Peter's Square as tour groups gathered for the weekly Angelus prayer. Pilgrims from around the world had arrived early, their voices creating a respectful murmur that echoed off the ancient colonnade. Among them strode Ethan Miller, his confident American voice cutting through the reverent atmosphere as he adjusted his expensive camera equipment. "This is going to be legendary, guys," Ethan announced to his reluctant companions. At 25, he'd built a modest following with what he called boundary-pushing content that danced dangerously close to genuine disrespect. St. Peter's Square on a busy Sunday morning couldn't offer a better stage for viral fame. His friends Noah and Caleb exchanged uncomfortable glances as they followed behind, cameras rolling, despite their evident reluctance. "Maybe we should just film the normal tourist stuff," Noah suggested quietly. "These guards aren't exactly known for playing along with pranks." Ethan scoffed, running his hand through his carefully styled hair. "They're paid to stand there and look intimidating. Besides, everyone does the usual try to make the guard laugh routine. I'm thinking bigger." The gleam in his eyes spoke of boundaries waiting to be crossed, viral potential that overrode basic human decency. 20 yards away, Sergeant Matteo Ricci stood at his ceremonial post. His blue, red, and yellow striped uniform gleamed in the morning light, the traditional halberd adding imposing height to his already substantial frame. 12 years in the Swiss Guard had taught him to read crowds instinctively. Most visitors showed proper respect. Some tested boundaries with harmless curiosity. A rare few, like the loud American now positioning himself for maximum audience impact, came looking for trouble. Ricci remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward with practiced discipline. Behind that stoic expression lay years of rigorous training and service that the approaching prankster couldn't begin to comprehend. As Ethan and his reluctant cameraman drew closer, Ricci did what he'd done countless times before. He prepared to represent the Holy See with unwavering dignity, regardless of whatever foolishness the day might bring. "Look at this guy," Ethan stage whispered to his friends, loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. "Standing there like a museum display. Do you think they select them based on who can look the most serious?" Several American teenagers snickered while an elderly Italian couple shot disapproving glances. A group of nuns from the Philippines quietly moved their students to a different viewing area, sensing trouble. Ethan squared his shoulders and approached with his practiced swagger, honed through years of pushing social boundaries. Back in Los Angeles, he'd built his reputation on increasingly audacious stunts, from interrupting university lectures to staging fake emergencies in upscale restaurants. Each prank required escalation. Each new video demanded more shock value than the last. "This whole outfit is just fancy dress-up," Ethan continued, circling the guard with exaggerated scrutiny. "Colorful stripes, shiny helmet, ceremonial weapon. It's theater, not actual security." His dismissal betrayed profound ignorance about the elite soldiers, who rotated between ceremonial duties and active protection assignments. A tour guide nearby quietly steered her elderly group toward the basilica entrance. An Italian businessman paused mid-phone call, shaking his head in disgust. "Ethan, seriously," Caleb murmured, camera aimed reluctantly at the unfolding scene. "These guys are actual soldiers. I read that they have combat training. They're tourist attractions." Ethan cut him off with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. If they were real soldiers, they'd be off doing real soldier things, not playing statue for holiday photos. A middle-aged American father gently pulled his curious children back several steps, recognizing the signs of impending disrespect. The crowd had begun to shift, some drawing closer in anticipation of entertainment, others creating distance to dissociate from whatever was coming. What Ethan failed to notice in his performance was the guard's eyes, focused, alert, and bearing the unmistakable awareness of someone who'd faced situations far more intense than a tourist's misguided prank. While Ricci maintained perfect stillness, his peripheral vision tracked Ethan's movements with the instinctive assessment of a trained soldier. Today's plan is genius, Ethan informed his increasingly uncomfortable friends. Start small, build up the tension, then deliver the ultimate payoff. It'll be legendary. He pulled out his phone, checking the time. We've got about 20 minutes before I unveil the main event. Noah shifted his weight, camera dipping slightly. Maybe we should just get some normal footage and move on. There's that cafe you wanted to try for lunch. And miss my shot at prank immortality? Not happening. Ethan's eyes gleamed with particular determination. Trust me, this is going to be the one that finally puts us on the map. Ethan began his performance with exaggerated military marching, legs kicking high, arms swinging with comical precision. A caricature of discipline intended to mock its genuine article. Attention! He barked in a terrible Italian accent. Swiss Guard inspection! A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the gathering onlookers. A Japanese family paused their photo taking, the father gently guiding his children several steps back from the unfolding scene. A German couple exchanged sharp whispers, their expressions making clear their disapproval, even across language barriers. Meanwhile, a school group of teenagers in matching red blazers watched with mixed reactions, some giggling, others visibly embarrassed by the Americans' behavior. Sir, a Vatican staff member approached, her tone professional but firm. I need to remind you that the Swiss Guard are serving military personnel. We ask that visitors show appropriate respect. Ethan flashed his most charming smile, just having a bit of fun. No harm done. He waited until she moved along before muttering, Killjoy, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Encouraged by having faced no real consequences, Ethan escalated. He moved closer to Ricci, posed for selfies with exaggerated faces, then pretended to polish the guard's ceremonial buttons while providing running commentary. Missed a spot there, buddy. Can't have the Pope's toy soldiers looking shabby for the tourists. A young mother covered her toddler's eyes. An elderly priest mumbled a prayer under his breath. This is getting out of hand, Noah whispered, but continued filming, caught between friendship, loyalty, and growing discomfort. Near the school group, their chaperone spoke quietly but clearly to her students. Despite what that young man is suggesting, the Swiss Guard are elite soldiers with extensive combat training. Most have served in conflict zones before receiving the honor of ceremonial duty. Ethan caught fragments of her explanation and rolled his eyes dramatically. Hear that? Apparently, I'm messing with an elite soldier. His air quotes and mocking tone drew a few nervous laughs, but increasingly fewer as the crowd's mood shifted. Throughout it all, Sergeant Ricci remained perfectly motionless. His discipline, forged through years of training, had prepared him for far worse than tourist antics. His gaze remained fixed forward, his posture immaculate, his breathing measured and controlled. Only the slightest tension in his jaw betrayed that he was indeed human. Ethan, interpreting this composure as weakness rather than strength, grew bolder. See, nothing. They might as well replace him with a wax figure. Probably be cheaper, too. He leaned closer, examining the guard's face with theatrical interest. Hello, anyone home? Or did they just wind you up this morning and leave you here? A few feet away, a gendarmeria officer spoke quietly into his radio, eyes never leaving Ethan. The Vatican's tolerance was visibly thinning, yet Ethan remained oblivious, riding the momentary attention like a wave already planning his next escalation. Time to take things up a notch, he announced to his increasingly reluctant audience. This is just the warm-up act. The morning wore on, and Ethan's antics grew progressively more intrusive. He began narrating an imaginary nature documentary about the elusive Swiss Guard in its natural habitat, complete with exaggerated American accent. When that failed to provoke a reaction, he started a one-sided interview, holding an invisible microphone to the guard's face and answering his own ridiculous questions. Does it hurt to wear that helmet all day? No comment? I'll take that as a yes, Ethan declared to diminishing laughter. Behind Ricci's impassive expression, his mind briefly flashed to his training at the Swiss Military Academy, 18 grueling weeks where he'd learned to maintain composure under far greater pressure than tourist pranks. He recalled his commanding officer's words. Your discipline reflects centuries of tradition. Your bearing represents the Holy Father himself. The memory strengthened his resolve as Ethan's behavior worsened. A teenage girl reached for her phone to record, then thought better of it and pulled her hand back. A seminarian in the crowd crossed himself quietly, whispering what appeared to be a prayer for patience. Ethan, seriously, let's move on. Caleb pleaded, camera still rolling, but enthusiasm long gone. You've done enough for one video. Not even close, Ethan replied, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I haven't shown you the main event yet. He patted his backpack with a wink. Go big or go home, right? Noah stepped closer, genuine concern crossing his face. What exactly are you planning? Just watch, Ethan grinned. It'll be the ultimate guard reaction video. Trust me, people will be talking about this for years. Nearby tourists had begun giving them a wide berth. Parents steered children to different vantage points. Couples found reasons to move along the square. The atmosphere had shifted from tourist excitement to something more uncomfortable. The tension of witnessing someone crossing boundaries of basic decency. Ethan noticed the thinning crowd around him and doubled down. His voice grew louder, his gestures more expansive. His comments became increasingly personal, mocking everything from the guard's posture to speculating rudely about what might be underneath the fancy costume. Do they make you audition for this gig? He asked nobody in particular. Stand perfectly still while some tourist tries to make you laugh? Bet that's not what you signed up for when you joined the costume department. Each disrespectful comment revealed Ethan's profound ignorance about the elite soldiers who rotated between ceremonial duties and active deployment. For men like Ricci, standing guard was not merely ceremonial. It was an honor earned through years of service, often including peacekeeping rotations that tourists like Ethan couldn't comprehend. An American grandmother gently pulled her grandson closer, her face showing clear disapproval. A French couple whispered to each other in rapid, agitated tones before moving their family away from the scene entirely. A gendarmerie officer moved closer, speaking quietly into his radio while maintaining a clear view of the escalating situation. The school group had relocated entirely, their chaperone occasionally glancing back with disapproval. All right, guys, Ethan announced, reaching for his backpack with theatrical flourish. Time for the main event, the prank to end all pranks. His friends exchanged alarmed glances as he unzipped the bag. I've been saving this all morning. The remaining onlookers sensed the crossing of an invisible line. Several more stepped back, while others watched with the morbid fascination of witnesses to an impending car crash. Ethan, however, appeared oblivious to the shifting atmosphere, focused entirely on his moment of perceived glory. Sometimes, he declared, you need to make a splash to get noticed. With a magician's flourish, Ethan pulled from his backpack what appeared to be an expensive professional camera. Only his friends recognized it for what it truly was, a high-quality water gun meticulously disguised to resemble photography equipment. The modifications had cost Ethan nearly $300 from a specialty prop shop in Hollywood, an investment he deemed worthwhile for what he called prank immortality. Now everyone, Ethan announced, slipping back into his role as entertainer, I'm going to capture a very special moment with His Holiness's finest. He raised the fake camera, adjusting non-existent settings with practiced movements. Several tourists raised their actual cameras, sensing a moment worth documenting, though for entirely different reasons than Ethan imagined. From the papal apartments above, Pope Francis had noticed the commotion in the square. His weathered face appeared briefly at the window, observing with the patient concern of a shepherd watching over his flock. The school chaperone, noticing the gleam of plastic where a lens should be, suddenly understood what was about to happen. Stop, she called out, breaking into a quick walk toward Ethan. That's completely inappropriate. But Ethan had committed fully to his performance. And now for the ultimate papal portrait, he began a theatrical countdown, playing to his dwindling but attentive audience. 3, 2, The disguised water gun discharged with shocking force, sending a concentrated stream of water directly into Sergeant Ricci's face. The liquid splashed across his immaculate uniform, darkening the colorful fabric and dripping from his feathered cap in steady rivulets. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, no one moved. Not Ethan. Not the crowd. Not even the security personnel who had started forward too late. The collective gasp that followed seemed to pull all oxygen from the square. Cameras lowered in shock. Parents physically turned children away from the scene. Ethan's own friends stepped backward instinctively, distancing themselves from what they now recognized as a serious transgression. From his window above, Pope Francis witnessed the entire incident. His expression shifted from patient observation to profound disappointment. Not anger, but the deep sadness of a father watching his child make a terrible mistake. Ricci remained perfectly still, water streaming down his face. His training was so ingrained that even this direct assault didn't immediately break his stance. Droplets gathered on his chin, fell to his chest, darkened the medals that represented actual service to the Holy See and the global Catholic community. His eyes, however, had changed, fixed now directly on Ethan, with the focused intensity of a soldier who had made a decision. Ethan's triumphant smile began to falter at the edges. The lack of immediate reaction wasn't what he'd expected. The crowd's horror, rather than amusement, wasn't in his mental script. Something in the guard's unwavering gaze sent the first chill of realization down his spine. "It's just water, man," Ethan offered weakly, the fake camera still clutched in his increasingly unsteady hands. "All in good fun, right?" The movement, when it finally came, was so swift and precise that onlookers would later disagree about exactly what they'd seen. Ricci stepped forward with military efficiency, each motion economical and purposeful. His white-gloved hand closed around Ethan's wrist with controlled pressure, not injuring but completely immobilizing. With his other hand, he relieved Ethan of the fake camera in one smooth motion that spoke of tactical training rather than ceremonial practice. Ethan's bravado evaporated instantly. His face drained of color as he found himself firmly secured by a man whose training and capability he had so thoroughly underestimated. The guard's grip wasn't painful, but it communicated with perfect clarity that any resistance would be unwise. It was just a joke," Ethan stammered, his American accent suddenly thicker with nervousness. The square had fallen into complete silence, the tension almost suffocating as the consequences of his prank began to materialize in real time. Ricci's expression remained professional, but there was something in his eyes that made Ethan swallow hard, the unmistakable look of someone who had faced actual threats and knew precisely how to handle them. Water continued to drip from the guard's uniform as he held Ethan in place, waiting for the gendarmeria officers who were now rushing toward them. In that moment, staring into the composed but unyielding face of the man he'd assaulted for entertainment, Ethan Miller finally began to understand the difference between a prank and a profound mistake. "Surrender the weapon," Ricci stated firmly, his voice carrying the clear authority of command despite its measured tone. He held the confiscated water gun with the same precise grip he would use for actual contraband. Ethan's wrist remained secured in Ricci's other hand, the guard's posture revealing years of tactical training that had nothing to do with ceremonial duty. "It's just a toy," Ethan protested weakly, his trademark confidence evaporating under Ricci's unwavering gaze. "Just a bit of fun. No harm done." "Assaulting a Swiss guard is a criminal offense," Ricci interrupted, each word precise and controlled despite the water still dripping from his face. "Not a prank, not a joke, not entertainment." Two gendarmeria officers arrived, positioning themselves on either side of Ethan. The crowd had formed a perfect circle around the scene, smartphones capturing every moment of Ethan's humiliation. His friends stood frozen, cameras lowered, their expressions a mixture of embarrassment and relief that they weren't standing in Ethan's place. "Just a prank, man," Ethan attempted again, a nervous laugh dying in his throat as it met Ricci's steady gaze. "This uniform isn't a costume," Ricci replied, his composure remarkable given the circumstances. "These medals aren't props." He released Ethan's wrist as the gendarmeria took position, but his presence remained commanding. "Before standing on this post today, I completed peacekeeping rotations in Lebanon and Kosovo. The men who guard St. Peter's Basilica returned recently from security training with NATO forces. Every guard here has served in active deployment." Ethan blinked, his perception visibly shifting as Ricci continued. "Each stripe on this tunic, Each medal, each piece of ceremonial equipment represents over 500 years of unbroken service to the Holy See, Ricci explained, not with anger, but with the clear purpose of education. When you mock this uniform, you mock the sacrifices of every soldier who has worn it, including those who never returned from their missions. The crowd remained silent, the only sound being the soft drip of water from Ricci's uniform onto the ancient stones beneath. Several older pilgrims nodded in solemn agreement with the guard's words. A group of seminarians crossed themselves quietly. I I didn't know, Ethan admitted, his bravado completely collapsed. Honestly, I thought you were just ceremonial, not real soldiers. Every guard on ceremonial duty has earned their place through actual military service, Ricci explained. The privilege of standing here comes after proving oneself in training and often in active deployment. One of the gendarmeria officers spoke into his radio, confirming that local police had been notified. Ethan's face paled further at this development. Are those real medals? Ethan asked, his tone completely transformed, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier mockery. Ricci gave a single nod. Kosovo Peacekeeping Mission, 2019, Lebanon Border Security, 2022. I'm sorry, Ethan said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise even him with their sincerity. I truly didn't understand who you are. I was being an idiot. The gendarmeria officer began to guide Ethan away, explaining in low voices the potential charges for interfering with papal security. As they moved him toward the security office, Ethan looked back over his shoulder. For what it's worth, he called, I really am sorry. I was wrong about everything. Ricci acknowledged this with the slightest inclination of his head before returning to his position with practiced precision. In one smooth motion, he resumed his stance. Shoulders back, chin up, halberd repositioned perfectly. Only the darkened patches on his striped tunic gave any indication of the incident that had just occurred. The watching crowd remained silent for a moment longer, then slowly, respectfully began to disperse. As they moved away, their manner had changed. Few posed for silly photos. More stood at a respectful distance, observing with newfound appreciation. Parents could be heard explaining to their children the true meaning of the guard's presence. Noah and Caleb approached the gendarmeria officers quietly, identifying themselves as Ethan's friends and asking what would happen next. Their cameras were now completely lowered, their earlier role as documentarians of Ethan's prank abandoned in favor of genuine concern. From his window above, Pope Francis watched the scene's conclusion with quiet satisfaction. The Swiss Guard had handled the situation with exactly the measured discipline that centuries of tradition demanded. No violence, no anger, only the patient strength that true authority required. Through it all, Ricci maintained his post, the water slowly drying on his uniform in the Roman sunshine. His eyes had returned to their forward gaze, his posture immaculate, his dignity completely intact despite the assault he'd endured. In the face of disrespect, he had responded not with anger but with education, a response that had transformed at least one tourist's perception completely. As the square returned to its normal rhythm, the only evidence of the incident was the slightly darker patches on a striped uniform and the profound lesson etched into the memories of everyone who had witnessed it. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come when our misconceptions meet reality head-on. What began as a prank video ended as a moment of genuine understanding about the men and women behind the ceremonial uniforms that guard the Vatican's sacred traditions. While pranks can bring laughter and create memories, there's a clear line between harmless fun and disrespect, a line that becomes visible only when we take the time to understand the traditions we encounter rather than dismissing what we don't immediately comprehend. If this story made you think differently about the Swiss Guard, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that might change your perspective. What prank have you seen cross the line from funny to disrespectful? Share your thoughts in the comments below.